Well, thank you all for being here today. We got two of our friends that slid halfway and then had to go home. So they're not on the stage with me today, but Eli and I have been working together on legalization, and we might be responsible for Act 86 passing. I'll give him a lot of credit. He headed up a group called Vermont, and at the time I was basically working with a group called Vermont Homegrown, if you've heard of it. And we were just a Facebook page, but between Eli and myself, we were able to get a couple of thousand people at a time to make a phone call to their senator or their legislator, any legislator. And that's how we got home grow for people in the state, and that's how we got all medical use for people in the state. One of the things I'm really here to talk about today is medical, but we'll also talk about a couple of bills that are going through the House, and also what the Cannabis Control Board is doing. We're fortunate to have 3 people on the Cannabis Control Board that are really working hard. They're really thinking about the small guy. They're realizing the errors that have been made in the system in the past and the limited system in the past, and they're trying to bring us forward, even though the legislature, and this is where you guys come in, are really blocking what the CCB are trying to do right now by not letting these bills get through rapidly. So one of the things I'll ask anybody that's listening to me today, whether you're on the camera or you're here, is to, if you don't know your senator and your House member's name, please find out who they are. Contact them, give them your opinion. I'm not going to tell you what to think today. I'm just going to give you as much information along with our friends here as we can. The other gentleman here, Nicholas, I've just met today. We had spoken by email a while ago. He's doing normal out of Burlington, and those guys are attacking from another angle. We have a number of groups in the state. We have a Growers Association that's working hard for it, and a number of patients that are really in on all of these meetings. We are fortunate that we're actually able to Zoom these meetings, because usually it's like a 3-hour drive, and sometimes it's a 1-hour meeting. It's 3 hours each way. So just to start off, we're at a point now where they're about to open up licensing, and we're trying to expand plant counts for both patients and for the average person. You know, we have a very limited plant count in this state. 2 per household. There's a marriage penalty there, and that's what we call it. And then we have a ridiculously low amount of plants for medical patients. We had a gentleman in the Northeast Kingdom in the last year, I believe it was, who faced down AR-15s from a wheelchair because he dared to grow 15 plants because he couldn't grow enough the season before, and he was only growing outside. So he faced federal charges, and even though he's a medical patient, and the people in the household at that time were also facing federal charges. My understanding now, and Eli can correct me if I'm wrong, is that that's all gone by the way. People chipped in. People showed up with an ounce apiece to give him something for his medicinal use, and I believe some other individuals also chipped in for his legal. But we shouldn't have to do that. I'm a medical patient. I've been a medical patient since about 2011, 2012. I carried the first plant into the first dispensary to open, which I don't care what anybody says, it was Montpelier and it was Vermont Patient Alliance. Okay, it was Marge's hairdo. It was about 3 feet tall. And that was Brian Barry's joke. He was one of our other important people. Some of the most important people here are Rick Veach, Cindy Veach, this gentleman's parents, and our friend Stuart Savell, who has passed recently, and his wife, who is Jeannie Keywell, who's an attorney from Brattleboro. These people started Vermont Homegrown. Without these 2 groups, without Eli, at the time he was doing Heady Vermont. Right now he's Vermont Awana, and he's going to speak about that. But if we didn't get these 2 groups together and we weren't able to get everybody going, we wouldn't have home grow today, and we wouldn't be getting it. The corporations would own it. What I'm going to talk to you today about is about the vertically integrated companies that have failed the medical program. And I say failed because people have suffered physically, and there has been loss of life that could have been avoided. I can't say guaranteed, but I can say that when I'm dealing with a patient who hasn't had good care for a year, and they're giving him a cookie instead of a Rick Simpson oil, we've got a problem. When I've got a patient that goes into a dispensary for her oil, in Brandon, and they go to give her a bud, and she says, no, I'm a cancer patient. And they say, we don't make it. And she says, why? And they say, we can't afford it. We've got a problem. And when I go into Senate hearings, like I did on S-216 in Ann Pugh's committee on the 3rd floor, and you listen to the DPS commissioner at the time talk about the great program that we have, when I've got my testimony will go on to say that day that we've got patients having to go over the Canadian border to get the cancer meds they need, and almost getting arrested on the way back for the radiation in their body. That's an actual occurrence, okay? We've got, I basically have been facilitating people finding good caregivers in Maine so they can get a clean, effective, and affordable product. When you've got an RSO in Vermont that's basically being made out of leaves and stalks, and is not—
Hey, friend.
Yeah.
Maybe you can just give these folks a little context as to just sort of where the medical program is now, just with kind of cards and access, just because I don't know who's in the room there. Maybe everybody's a patient, but you know, just a little sense of even just where the kind of basic snapshot of what the laws are and what you guys are sort of trying to change.
Okay. It's a good thing you cut me off. I can go for a while. The basic situation that we're in right now is we have 5 integrated licensees. We have a great group of caregivers that are not getting paid, that haven't been paid over the years. They've been doing this for free or at a loss to themselves. The integrateds tried to take that caregiving capability away from caregivers in the state of Vermont. We have thwarted that at this point. We are up to 2 patients per caregiver, but in the in Bill Senate 186 right now, they're still trying to limit a patient from caregiving for 2 patients rather than having that patient be able to caregive. They're only allowed to caregive for 1 patient. So that's arbitrary and capricious at best. We're dealing with the integrated, still trying to slice away at this market and keep it for themselves. All right? Eli wrote a beautiful article that defines this wonderfully, that they were selling a license and not a product since 2012. They were not supporting the patients as much as they should be. Some patients got some benefit out of it, no question, but the majority of the people that I've spoken to over the years either just got rid of their card because it was worthless, or started using a caregiver, or were growing on their own. So what we're trying to do now is expand caregiving so you can have up to 5 patients, just like they do in Maine. Every time we go into these things, they want to compare themselves to a system that's already up and running, and we like to compare it to Maine. They have over 3,000 caregivers there. We don't have near as many that are licensed. But if we're going to make it so that people want to get a license, because right now under Act 86, I can share with you, I just can't sell to you, and I can't make a living off of that, and so I can only go so far. So we're trying to expand the number of caregivers per patient so that if 3 people want to handle 1 person, because it's a heck of a lot of work, I can tell you. You want to grow that plant, you want to grow those plants, and you got to grow them to perfection, and they got to be there, and you got to make that oil for that person. I know how to make RSO. I've made RSO for a number of people and shared it. You're allowed to do that right now. But what we want to do is we want to see that expanded. We don't want to see them be able to own that market. We want to be so that there is a caregiver within reach of these patients. Many of them are in remote locations that are not close to the integrated licensees. And even when they get there, these things are not available to them all the time. When you've got $10,800 for a 60-gram supply of cancer meds, and that's one patient, okay? And then in Maine, it's $3,800. There's a bit of a difference. And in Maine, that product is clean, effective, and affordable. Here, it hasn't been. We've had the dispensaries in Brattleboro pull back moldy weed to Burlington and then throw it through a supercritical CO2 machine, okay, and serve it up to patients with immune-compromised systems. They would tell you that cleans it up. I can tell you that does not clean it up. It concentrates the mold. It concentrates the poison, okay? I'm going to say it. The lady was in charge, is now the brand experience officer for that corporation. As far as I'm concerned, she's the queen of mold. She always will be. They admitted this crime to me, by the way, so I'm not talking off my hat here. Okay, they did this at the Hemp Fest in 2018. Mr. Harrington was in the room. So these are the things that we're dealing with in medical. We're trying to expand caregiving. We're trying to increase the plant count, and we're trying to basically lower the cost for people in the state and make these very important oils available, especially to cancer patients, MS patients, Parkinson's patients, and others. Now, the other problem we're having is everybody considers chronic pain to be, oh yeah, he's using chronic pain to get a card. And that's something we have to get over. Also, we need to basically take away from the legislators the right to limit the conditions that this therapy can be used for. I don't see any reason that a legislator should be controlling a medical decision for anyone in the state of Vermont, and they are right now by limiting conditions. They've had to do this over the years because everyone was so afraid of what they were doing back in 2012. They had to give this to the Department of Public Safety because no one else would take it. The whole health department wouldn't touch it. But the Department of Public Safety has failed repeatedly when there have been violations to deal with these issues with the integrateds. Of course, they'd have to sue themselves, so that might be a problem. And when I questioned them on it, which I did this summer in the headquarters of the DPS, okay, they had no excuse for it, but I noticed that there was a gentleman who got shifted to Fish and Game pretty quick. I shot a little low. I should have been shooting up to the deputy commissioner level, or maybe a little higher for the last commissioner that when he left, he went to DC all of a sudden. So these are the things that we've dealt with. This is the kind of thing that we're dealing with because there are so many people in Montpelier, in government, and other places that each have a piece of this pie. They've invested in these corporations. We can't find out who's invested, but we can tell you who's been forming laws since the beginning of this program to support these integrated corporations and keep other people from getting in to help people. We've had to go to extreme measures just to get caregiving. Okay, I had to point out that Governor Shumlin had a caregiver for his dad when that caregiver wasn't supposed to be helping that cancer patient. All of a sudden it was a possibility. So this is what we're dealing with. This is the kind of energy we're dealing with. But with the CCB, with Commissioner Pepper, and with Ms. Hulbert, and oh God, Kyle, I always remember, forget his, what? Harris, Mr. Harris. I'll call him Mr. Harris. These guys have been great. Okay, you can come into the meeting next Tuesday in the evening and you can see the public response. All you have to do is go to the CCB website and do that, and we can get you that link for it. So anyway, that's an overview right now of where we're at. Eli, did I miss anything?
There's a lot there, man. I mean, I appreciate I think everybody can tell you've been at the medical for a long time, and I think that it's important to start there. And I thank you, Fran, and appreciate you. I don't know if you're officially passing the mic off to me, but just wanted to say thank you, and just appreciate that we are here. I think medical started in Vermont back in 2002, 2003. Got to give former Lieutenant Governor, then Representative David Zuckerman, a lot of credit for leading that charge, and a lot of advocates back in those days. It's hard to imagine a time when somebody would have to be arrested in a nursing home for trying to smoke a joint as a medical patient in Burlington. But that's where things were at 2003 and 4. And so a lot of people are the reason that we're able to have this conversation today. I can smoke a joint on camera here while we talk, and sort of we can look at kind of where we're going here in Vermont. So with, just sort of structurally, I think, not knowing sort of where folks are at in the room, just a little context. And I do want to invite Nick, to hop in if I miss anything here, just sort of give people a little snapshot of where we're at, because I know he's spending a lot of time in Montpelier in these meetings. And so kind of where we are now, Fran mentioned this Cannabis Control Board. We have a tax and regulate bill that was passed last year. The control board took a lot of testimony from the public, held a lot of meetings. I think people really feel positive about it. You know, I do, at least as far as being listened to by this group. And so this control board are the group that will ultimately govern cannabis regulations in Vermont. There are 3 individuals, and they serve usually 3-year terms. They're appointed by the executive branch and then approved by a nominating committee that includes the legislature. And then there's also an advisory board, right? So right now, these commissioners have taken all this information. They've put it into a tax and regulate proposal. It's on the website. The board's done a great job of putting all this info out there, all the links. It's, you know, Cannabis Control Board Vermont. If you Google that, you can find everything, including all these meetings. This board is putting together their final recommendations, and then they're submitting them to the legislature, as Fran mentioned. So the legislature is going to give some feedback on some specific things, and I'll look forward to asking Nick about updates, you know, things like zoning, you know, medical changes, tax rates. There are just some final details that the legislature is going to want to talk about, and they might have some differences of opinion. So right now we're actively waiting for this to happen. Nick, I don't know if you guys have a sense of when this LCAR group, this legislative like super group, is scheduled to put forward final recommendations, but is that kind of right as far as the timeline?
Hey, thanks Eli for the introduction. Yeah, so a little update on that. So first of all, to introduce myself, my name is Nick Shorman, Executive Director of Vermont NORML. I just want to start by saying thank you to our organizers today for having this event, and it's a real pleasure to, I guess I can say share the stage virtually and with Eli and Fran. So it's really, you guys have been at this, you guys are veterans, so it's really an honor to be here. As far as an update with some of the pressing details, especially for those looking to get licensed, as we know, the Cannabis Control Board has been in the rulemaking process for a number of months now, taking public comment and absorbing that and seeing that reflected in the rules that they're submitting to the legislator. But you know, something that we often forget that's very important is that these are recommendations to the legislator, emphasis on that word recommendation. Much of the language that they discuss in their meetings, while it can seem as though final when they vote on it, this is not actually the case. So there's currently a bill that is in Senate Finance Committee, H701. That is the structure for licensing fees for all mixed tiers of cultivation, all tiers of cultivation, manufacturing. And what that is it is a bill that has to be passed by both chambers that would finalize the numbers, the prices for those bills. And essentially what that is what we've come to know. So for example, I think the lowest tier indoor cultivation, 1,000 square feet, is about $750 right now as it stands. If I'm wrong, let me know.
No, you're right.
Thank you. But those numbers aren't final, is the point I'm trying to make. So it really emphasizes the point to get involved and write your, and get involved in local politics as much as you can, because these are bills, these are numbers that are, you know, obviously extremely important to small growers and everybody across in the industry. But besides that, we are following another bill, H548. H548 is titled a Miscellaneous Cannabis Establishment Bill. It does a number of things, one of which is it has a pro-labor segment to it, which decouples employees' identification cards from their employers, so allowing them to move easily from one job to another. It exempts oils and concentrates from the 50 milligram THC per package limit. It would also allow for individuals to, or companies to apply for multiple testing laboratories, something that we're definitely proponents of. And finally, what we're trying to do there is tack on a delivery amendment. So obviously, you know, as Fran has alluded to, there are medical patients in this state who lack easy access to cannabis. And this will obviously be hindered by Vermont's opt-in model that we have chosen. Opt-in, as you know, is one of the reasons why we're here today, is to talk about the benefits of opt-in and what that means for the town. So what we're proposing with the delivery bill is it would allow individuals, consumers, medical patients to engage in online ordering and get their cannabis delivered to their front door. Now, more specifically, this amendment the amendment would open delivery licenses exclusively to folks who qualify as social equity applicants. Now, the idea here is that this particular license, the delivery license, is the lowest startup cost and the lowest barrier to entry relative to any of the licenses available: cultivation, manufacturing, testing. We see a lot of those licenses as requiring access to capital or very specialized knowledge. I mean, as we know, some of the growers in Vermont have been at this for decades. And for someone looking to get into the industry who might not have that knowledge, it can be very difficult to compete. So what we look at this license as an entry point for people who have been harmed by cannabis prohibition, who don't have access to capital, or who don't have the specialized knowledge to start a business. And it obviously would benefit medical patients and consumers alike. I mean, more cars on the road delivering cannabis, more options, more variety, lower prices. So we really see this as a win for everybody involved across the cannabis spectrum, all players in the industry. So that's a bill we're keeping an eye on. And you know, besides that, there is a date coming up, March 11th, that is crossover for a lot of these bills, which will move from one chamber to the next. So we're trying to get our push in with our current agendas right now before that date. But besides that, we're working really hard. We're here in Montpelier as much as we can, and looking forward to keep everybody updated as more updates come out.
Eli, would you pick up, thank you, Nick. Would you pick up 188 and talk about the farming bill for a minute?
Sure. Well, I also just want to, I think it might be worth just kind of zooming back a little bit, because I assume, you know, a lot of folks who are there are probably following this, paying attention, reading, you know, updates, following this on IG and stuff. But just to kind of back up when we're talking about license types, you know, and I have to say, I'm still a registered lobbyist. It's like almost being like a sex offender. You have to like disclose that when you when you speak to people. I only work for myself though, but I don't have a specific bill that I want to talk about necessarily, but I did just want to kind of point out, you know, what we're looking at as far as the different licenses and the timeline as to how they're going to roll out. So, you know, Nick mentioned delivery is something that's being proposed. Right now we're looking at 3 different kinds of cultivation licenses, you know, an outdoor, an indoor, and a mixed. The sizes of these are based on square footage for indoor and plant count for outdoor and mixed. I believe the smallest one is 125 plants. The largest one is 4,500 plants for the sun-grown out there. And there are some questions Fran alluded to about the difference with how the definition of farming and growing cannabis might or might not work together. There is a bill that Fran mentioned that's trying to include cannabis, or at least small cultivation, as farming, you know, which has zoning implications. But right now there are 3 different types of cannabis cultivation. Towns cannot prevent them from happening. There's no opt-in. So all these licenses, except for retail, they are allowed by default. However, the towns can decide via zoning how they want to place and maybe advantage or disadvantage or encourage or discourage some of these businesses. The city of Winooski, for example, they love retail. They don't want any manufacturing. They had a big stinky ass hemp processor who left town, you know, and stunk up the whole flats down there. So like towns will vary on what they want, but retail is the only thing they need to vote in. So if you're looking at cultivation, if you're looking at manufacturing and processing, if you're looking at a wholesale license, if you're looking at you know, an indoor license, if you're somebody who's out there who's running a testing lab, looking at that, like call me, please. We need more of you. That's another license type, and you can hold every one of these licenses. So, you know, I, as somebody who wants to do outdoor, you know, I call it sun-grown. So I'm not going to say outdoor and slander this beautiful sun-grown cannabis. Somebody like me, I could potentially get a license for cultivating outdoors. I could get a manufacturing license, process here at the same location. either with solvents, either with chemical solvents, I should say, or just with solventless extraction, ice, coconut oil, whatever else. So I can get each of these individual licenses. I could get my own retail license. That would have to be in a different specific place. And retail is really kind of its own game here. We talked about a little bit sort of the opt-in, which you folks are familiar with this process. Nick, I don't know how many, there's at least 4 or 5 towns, probably way more than I don't know about, that have this on the town meeting day ballot. But I know we had about 30 that opted in last year on town meeting day. The way this works right now is that there's a 20% total tax. 14% of it is the cannabis excise tax. The other 6 is the regular state tax, the regular sales tax. So that 14% right now, all 14% goes to the state. So if your town is thinking about hosting a retail business, you're not getting any of that tax. Now, if you're a town that has a local option tax, and I believe there are about 20 of them, you have a 1% tax on everything, right? So that includes cannabis. So all the local option tax towns, most of them have opted in. They have a direct incentive. They're getting 1%. Right now, other towns that don't get a single % of the retail sale. They also really can't charge a huge fee for licensing. So this is, I think, one of the legislative questions that is yet to be resolved, because I know a lot of legislators are saying, hey, how can we get a town like, up where I am, like Hardwick, to open up a dispensary if they're not going to get any of the tax revenue, but deal with all the extra traffic and, whatever else. Concerns that are valid and, some that are BS, right? But that's sort of a big issue. And I know with retail opt-in, Nick, do you have a sense of how many more towns are putting this on the ballot? Because, before even crossover date, this is something that you'd want to know, right? If you're voting locally and you don't have a local option tax.
Yeah, thanks. Eli, I think that was really eloquently laid out. The exact number, I'm not sure. I think it is about definitely at least 5 or 6, and they vary from southern Vermont. They're all over the place. But another thing I wanted to point out too, that with these opt-in votes, so as we know, it doesn't only show what it allows is for retail, but it also allows for an integrated license to operate in that town. That is included in the language in Act 164. So an individual who wanted to open, a dispensary, a cultivation business would be limited to a town that has opted in. Again, there is a date, I believe it is in 2024 or sometime next year, where any town who has failed to opt in automatically opts in. So that is a date in the not too distant future to look out for. But regardless, I mean, these votes they're huge, and they can be hard to get on the ballot for a lot of times because, I mean, we did a lot of work in Essex, and Essex didn't allow us to get virtual signatures. And that it can be extremely difficult in a place like Vermont. I mean, we are in Essex, which is a relatively heavily populated place. It's extremely hard to get foot traffic and get signatures to hand into the local board. So there still is a stigma against this. I mean, the local town is the one who operates and controls these signature gathering and such. So it's really important that, as we can get as much of the word out about local opt-in votes as possible, and really educate the public. I mean, this is a huge part about what we're trying to do more in general. I mean, I'm sure Eli and Fran can echo this.
Well, can I jump in right now?
It.
Can I jump in, Nick? In Jamaica, Vermont, we had an initial vote that was a single question, whether we wanted retail and or integrated licenses, but they didn't separate it. Now, it wasn't warned properly, so people that were for cannabis or against cannabis asked for a second vote. I was able to get a second vote where we split the vote into 2 questions, and we voted for retail but against the integrateds until everyone could get an integrated license. Like Eli said, you can get your licenses individually, but the integrated licensees have it much easier at this point than the average individual. Anyway, there you go.
Yeah, and I think just to be clear, that integrated license that we're talking about is something that is only accessible to the medical dispensaries who exist currently. So, they are all owned by out-of-state, large corporations, operated locally. And I will say, a lot of advocacy did come from dispensaries. A lot of patients still access, dispensaries. So, I think there's a lot of energy to reform the laws, and there are not a ton of outspoken patients who are who want the status quo to continue. And I think that's all really going to change. And the medical program, there's a lot of energy to open it up and really expand it, whether it's with small caregivers and or having products at adult use dispensaries that medical patients will access, and they'll be able to buy products that are higher milligrams and or tax-free. Ideally, to Fran's point, people can grow enough finally, to supply themselves with what they actually need. As we know, things like cost of lights don't change just because you can grow more plants. So it's still going to be a challenge, but I think medical is opening up a lot, and there's going to be a lot of pressure on these adult use stores to help support medical. And I think that's going to be good, and there will be a lot of medical patients, hopefully, who are involved in the industry. I think there are a lot of people out there who are experienced. I think there are going to be a lot of jobs that are going to be created through this. It's really not even a question of if. So we're sort of just at this tipping point right now, and literally right now, as we sit here in late February, waiting to see how these final things take shape. I don't think anybody's going to be satisfied with all of it, but we do know that this board has been very responsive, this control board. We know that, things like the delivery licenses, things like event permitting, that's kind of my business with, Vermont Tawana. And it's always a question, right, about sort of consumption. Can people consume? Can you advertise it? If it's a private event, you have ID checkers, right? And so clarity on that so that it looks maybe, I guess, more like alcohol, but at least provide some clarity so people who are hosting events, you can have consumption, and say somebody's wedding, you could have a DAP bar, and it's not going to be a question for the venue host, right? It'll just be like somebody having a catering license and serving alcohol. So, those types of things we definitely see happening, including a lot more probably medical reforms too, as things continue to open up. But I did want to say too, I've been saying this, and Southern Vermont, it's like there's so many growers and OG growers down there, and so much like Vermont cannabis culture and history. I will say, I think that I'm really happy that Vermont did home grow first. This question of where can people buy it. The most important thing, I think, was really stopping putting people in jail and abusing them and harassing them, for cultivating, consuming, doing all this. And, we see a lot of focus on social equity and really being restorative, and cannabis going, above and beyond other industries to try to right some of these wrongs in the past. So I just wanted to say, we know prohibition was a total failure, and I think home grow, allowing people to sort of share it with other people, not policing people's consumption. I think things have really been good in a criminal justice reform sense. There's been a ton of expungements happening. Shout out to, Nick, I know you guys did a lot of work with that with Normal. I know individual attorneys, people like David Silberman, Pennywise Foundation, has done a lot of that work too. So that's been that's really been.
Hey, and Legal Aid as well. Sorry, I just want to give a shout out. BJ and Legal Aid as well did a expungement clinic.
Thank you. Yeah. So that's really been positive on the individual kind of level, and really I think people out there, if you talk to people in the legacy market, that's why I was giving credit to Southern Vermont here and all the OGs down there. It's gotten way less lucrative for people who are in the legacy market, people who are in the illicit market, what used to be called the black market, right? I mean, it's like, pack prices are terrible right now, right? Like wholesale out there, it really has taken a huge chunk out of the illicit market by allowing home grow. I mean, it's reality out there. So I do want to just acknowledge that, because I think that was something that was a big question for advocates. And really, like, the price of cannabis has fallen already, in the illicit market. It's so much easier to get. There's so much more quality out there, even amongst home growers and people who now can grow in the front yard instead of the back or the side yard, instead out in the patch in the woods. So just really want to acknowledge that. Starting with that, I think, was really positive, and keeping our eye on that. And also anybody out there who has suffered because of cannabis prohibition. Social equity, status is definitely something to look into. There are a lot of workshops coming up. They have virtual components. They're really trying to be accessible. And being a social equity applicant, I believe right now, would eliminate the licensing fee. And I think it tears it down. So Nick, do you have more on that?
Yeah, I do. Actually, I want to speak directly to that point and piggyback on what a point I started on. So if you remember, I mentioned a bill earlier called H701. H701 is the bill in the Senate Finance Committee, and what it does is it finalizes the fees for all the various licenses out there. What it also does, and this is very important, this speaks to exactly what Eli just said, is it would also put the waived license fee. So as it stands right now, social equity applicants get 100% of their license fee waived for the first year. The following year, the business would have 75% of the fee waived, 50% of the fee waived the year after that, 25, and then by year 5, I believe, they would be paying the full amount. We look at this as a basic necessity in a market that has otherwise been, inaccessible to people of color and other folks who qualify as a social equity applicant. That provision is in H701. The point I'm trying to make is there is a chance, and we have heard some confirmation, but there is a chance that those waived license fees may not go into effect at all if they're not voted on by the appropriate committees. So nothing is guaranteed. There is a chance that we will have a cannabis market come later this year in which a social equity applicant doesn't even have the basic necessity of a waived license fee to get started. So I just wanted to point that out as something that is taking place right now. And in addition to that, I really want to speak on the kind of the head start that the Big Five are getting, and how important it is to, like we do with everything else here in Vermont, buy local. This is a market that is going to be around for a long time. We talk about, these 2-year windows, 3-year windows. What we're looking for with the delivery bill is a 10-year window, because, at the end of the day, 2, 3, 4, 5 years is nothing in the grand scheme of things. That being said, we look at these 5 months as 5 months to really focus on what's coming next. So as we know, May is when the first cannabis sale is set to happen. May 1st, and then by October 1st, what we like to call the mom and pop shops are going to be able to open up. And we really look at those 5 months as a time of, holding out for the little guys as best as we can. Because, like we do with beer, like we do with our produce, we got to buy local and we got to shop craft. And I think that's essential to this market. Like anything else, the market moves where the customer's money goes. And if the customer's money goes to a local farmer, a local retailer, a local product manufacturer, you're supporting someone who maybe lives down the road from you. That is the essence of a Vermont economy, a strong, sustainable Vermont economy where money spent in Vermont stays in Vermont. That is something that we feel is, really vital to this market. So I urge all of you, don't necessarily hold out. I know May 1st is an exciting day, and we're all going to be pumped to get in line. Hopefully there's enough on the shelves. But really, we're looking forward to October 1st, and when the little guys can open up and we can really start supporting our small businesses in and around the state.
And Nick, I think we heard, there's not a cap on any of these licenses right now. Right now, I think the realistic, cap is, and the question that we don't know is, if 500 people submit a grow license, for a small cultivator on April 1st, you know, when are 1 through 499 issued, when's 500, you know, issued, how long does it take them, how long does it take the board, right? So these are things we don't know, and you know, I think it's going to be a rough first couple years, no matter what, and there's going to be a lot of fluctuation. There's going to be, you know, a lot of price change. Fran, are there any hemp people in any room? Anybody who had a hemp license?
Anybody here?
Growing a hemp permit?
I did a hemp 3 years ago.
Okay, our host is here.
We can't see, so I don't know how many. We get like a couple? Any?
I got one. I got one.
No. Zero?
One.
Okay.
One.
I think a lot of people who are in the hemp CBD game. One. Okay. So, you know, I think that maybe this person can speak to this, right? There were lessons learned in that business, and I think one of the major, you know, concerns and questions for people who are going to be growing is, you know, getting access to that retail market, right? And right now we don't have specifics on a couple really important things. I'm just trying to talk about this kind of from a producer, you know, standpoint of somebody who's thinking about, you know, trying to like, how do you get to market and what are all the steps going to be? We don't have specifics about the testing yet. We know there's going to be testing requirements. It's probably going to include at least a one-time, you know, micro. Who knows if you're going to have to test, like, are you going to have to test organic soil every year? You know, who knows? But there's going to have to be testing for cannabinoids, you know, maybe terpenes. You know, I mean, you should have that on there anyways, but there will be cannabinoid testing and labeling on everything. There's going to be some sort of tracking. You know, that's a big question right now. Are we going to have to barcode every single plant, you know, and track it with a scanner every time it moves? Or is it going to be done at the point of harvest, you know, as it enters the system? So these are some of the details that really, it makes it hard, you know, if you're trying to sit there and fill out a spreadsheet as far as like how I'm going to start my business. We still don't know some of those overhead fixed costs. And, you know, there are companies out there that provide these services, you know, and have estimates and stuff. So you can ballpark it, but we're waiting to figure that out. And, you know, what I guess I would say, you know, one of the big lessons I think from hemp and CBD, people who are in there is really thinking about starting small. You know, I think there is going to be more demand than supply in the first year. I know people are concerned, you know, now that you can grow 4,000 plants, you know, with a license, is that going to flood the market? I think there's just going to be a ton of demand. Like, obviously I'm optimistic. I'm somebody who's going to try to grow and sell in the white market here, right? So I think that it's going to be a good year for people who can make it to the shelves and a good opportunity. But I think it's going to be about sustainability and not, you know, things are going to crash, prices are going to drop, you know, precipitously as competition increases. Just like hemp and the Farm Bill changed things with things moving out of state and balancing out, federal prohibition will end, you know, I think in the next 3 to 4 years, like it's inevitable. Thanks in part to a lot of advocacy that's happened in decades. And,
Hey, Eli?
you know, so I think that that's something that, you know, people who are thinking about this should really, you know, one of the lessons clearly from hemp is about being sustainable, thinking through the whole end of the process and having no idea whether, you know, probably want to be able to sell it before you plant it this time around, especially if we're going to be paying, you know, between $1,000 and $5,000 for a license.
Eli, can you
Right.
hear me now? Can you hear me? Okay, we lost you for a little bit there. I'd like to just break for a minute and allow anybody in the room to ask any questions they might have at this time. You can put it to any person on the group here. So if anybody's got any, do I have anybody that's?
I'll ask my question.
Okay, we're gonna let you do the question.
Hi. So I have not been following the policy and law, but I remember.
Come right up.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay. You got audio there?
I guess.
All right. Well, that's all right. We'll let her come up and come up and say hi to the guy.
You can just talk.
Just talk.
Oh, okay. Hi everyone. So I have not been following much, so I'm a beginner learning about the legislation, but I remember this vague notion of the reason things were delayed in the Vermont legislation was because they really wanted to protect the Vermont farmers. And I want to know what happened with that. It sounds like it didn't happen, but
It hasn't happened yet, yeah.
so if you could speak to how Vermont is working to protect the local farmer, that would be great.
Okay, well, it's in statute, thank you. It's in statute, actually, that they have to bias to the local, to the local small farmer. But there are some complications, and I'll let Eli touch on that for a minute. Why don't you go for that?
I think they're actively working on this. You know, there is a bill out there to consider small scale cultivation of cannabis as farming. I think that would be the most significant thing. You know, concerns that farmers have are, do I need to take this, if I do cannabis as a business, like let's say, you know, in the yogurt room or something, or, you know, take this piece of my field, do I have to change the use, take it out of agricultural use and do a change of use to do a cannabis business on a farm? And, you know, right now I think the answer is yes. And I'm not an attorney, I'm not giving legal advice, say that. But, you know, this is something that's a big issue. You know, there's a back and forth with natural resources and agriculture. You know, and I think basically the state wants to make sure that cannabis businesses are not going to, we're going to be subject to the RAPs, you know, the required agricultural processes, you know, and probably even have more scrutiny about things like wastewater, you know, water remediation, water runoff. I know there's a lot of consideration about energy use. So, yeah, as far as, you know, advantaging, you know, people who are farmers specifically, you know, I guess what I would say is that, you know, as somebody who is, you know, kind of doing like a homestead scale thing, I think really thinking ahead to tourism, a lot of people are doing this. You know, I have a friend up here, Ben, at Off Piste Farm. Fran knows him. He's done some work there. You know, he had a hip campsite, you know, and having CBD plants enabled him to increase the value. He was able to sell more of his pork off the farm, you know, and whatever else, dilly beans, right? So, integrating cannabis rather than thinking about it as a cash crop, as a monocrop, you know, I think those people are going to be more successful overall. This legislation, we'll see. You know, the bottom line is that until federal prohibition changes, you know, federal insurers, USDA, right, they're still going to consider cannabis like a Schedule I substance. So that's a huge deal. And I think something that's really going to have to change to get, you know, conventional farmers in. I will give a shout out to Zion Farms up here in St. Johnsbury, who are actually soliciting farmers to grow industrial hemp. And by that, I mean, you know, actual industrial hemp, which they're going to use for animal bedding. They've got a great video that they did at the UVM hemp conference before. So, you know, as all the cannabis interest and CBD interest has also driven interest in industrial hemp.
Eli,
And,
when you say industrial hemp, you're talking about the male fiber plant. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm talking about, you know, 13-foot tall, you know, broadcast, harvested, you know, the pitch that these guys are making is, you know, basically the same equipment you use for hay. Although I think they use a side cut, you know, mower instead. But basically that they'd be buying, you know, industrial hemp at like, whatever, 500, 600, 800 bucks an acre, you know, processing it. So, you know, farmers might actually start looking at that. And then you have questions about seed drift and all that sort of stuff. That'll be coming. But I don't know, Nick, is there any other, you know, other stuff? I know it's a big question and, you know,
let me jump in.
association and also rural Vermont, is definitely involved in cannabis advocacy. You know, they have been for a long time. So is NOFA Vermont. And the Vermont Growers Association. You know, these groups have all really been looking at this. And Nick, I don't know if there's anything else they've been working on that I'm missing. But
let me jump in for guys. Let me jump in for 1 second, Nick. The Cannabis Control Board is actually doing wonderful things on this for the small grower in the sense that they've taken it from just a 1,000 square foot grow outside to a plant count, and this is going to be a much simpler way for the state to determine what you're doing. It also allows for different types of farming. Yes?
They also mentioned that it is non-contiguous. so you can spread your plants out.
Right, exactly, which is, you know, Eli's chickens get a lot of exercise under the plants, his hemp plants. But that's an important thing that they're doing, is to adapt to the farmers' needs, to the way that the farmers are growing at this time. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, thanks, guys. So to speak to the question of what is the state of Vermont doing to protect small growers, you know, I'll speak to, there's a fundamental aspect of Act 164, which is the bill legalized 2019, 2020, which set up a retail market. It moved it from an illicit market to a retail market that we're going to have this year. And one of the fundamental aspects of that is the difference between horizontal and vertical integration. And the differences between those is important to see how Vermont has set up to protect small businesses. So what that means is someone who comes in to want to open a dispensary in Vermont, right? What they're not allowed to do, and this is called horizontal integration, is they're not allowed to open 10 dispensaries. And what that means is they're not allowed to come in, corner the market, and then all of a sudden you're looking around and it's, you know, Coke, Pepsi, Coke, whatever, however you want to call it. But what they are allowed to do, we've spoken about this, is you're allowed to get one of each license type. So if you imagine the supply chain, where you have cultivator, say testing, product manufacturer, retail, consumer, you can vertically integrate that whole supply chain, which means you can have one of each license. And really the idea there is, you know, someone who has really extensive industry knowledge can set up a retailer, can set up a product manufacturing. I mean, God bless someone who gets all five, but you know, it keeps someone out from coming and getting 10 retail, 10 cultivation licenses, so we don't have, you know, something like, I don't know, Snoop Dogg's weed and Willie Nelson's weed. That's all you have. It really protects these little guys, these 1,000 square foot farmers. Because, you know, and I'll say this once, I'll say it again, the last thing we want to see is failed businesses. Yeah. You know, the last thing we want to see is someone join the market, and then the price, you know, goes down in year 3, 4, 5, whatever it may be, and they're worse off than if they had never entered at all. So, I mean, that's just a community principle across, you know, the whole world. It's the last thing that we want to see is failed businesses. So we're really happy to see this as a fundamental protection, but we would love to see more down the line.
We need farm to table. It's the answer right there.
Absolutely.
That's all you need to know. Farm to table. I want that farmer who's growing your food and your vegetables to be able to have that additional crop, just like I was saying, a multiple crop situation where they can break even or make a profit at the end of the year. They're feeding us now. They're not going to poison us. We've had some wonderful farmers come in over the years and testify before Senate committees. And I remember Emily, who has a farm close to here, saying to me, what, I'm going to take my fresh cannabis and put some PCP in it? You know, and so when you get it controlled, so that we're not saying sell it to anybody under 21. We're not saying that, you know, it's going to be controlled to some degree, but you can buy your liquor at a liquor store, and you can buy as much liquor as you want, and you can take it home in your car. Well, there's a limit. I know there's an actual federal limit. But we need to have the small guy. When we started this with S241 way back just after David Zuckerman's S95, and by the way, we have to give David credit for getting Eli, myself, and another 10 people into his office to get the votes passed for Act 86. So he's running for Lieutenant Governor again. I'll put in a plug for him. But this whole thing of just keep it simple. We just wanted to keep it simple, and they've created a bureaucracy that's going to make it a little harder. But the eventuality, I hope, is farm to table. There you go.
And you know, you raise a fundamental question here. Sorry, Eli, I didn't mean to cut you off. But you know, it's something that we have to appreciate, I think, and it's something that, as advocates, it's an issue that we deal with a lot. And that is, how do you strike a balance between serving government interests, in which there are two explicit ones, and that is moving folks from the illicit market to the retail market while simultaneously getting as much money as possible, raising as much taxes. So those are your two government interests. The complete opposite side of that is, you know, the cost incurred from someone joining the recreational market from the illicit market. Is it worth it? So how do you strike a balance between not charging people too much for licenses, for taxes? I mean, Vermont, as we said, has a 20% tax I'm not going to sit here and tell you that's nothing. So there's a 20% tax on all sales. I will say that we do have some of the lowest licensing fees in the country, so we're extremely happy about that. But that is a balance that is, fundamental political debate in drug policy that goes across, even goes beyond that. And it's just something to keep in mind that there is a balance that has to be struck, and that balance, as we've said, 20% tax, it's a 750, however you want to look at it. But that is the fundamental problem that the state of Vermont is trying to grapple with when writing these rules and regulations.
So right now, Fran, I don't know if there are other people questions or want to join in. I know you folks definitely, we have our contact info out there. Please follow up with me after I'm doing stuff in Southern Vermont. I'll spray.
I've got one more question. I've got a lady with a question here. Can you hear her from there?
Gail?
Hi.
Gail?
Hiya, good evening. I have a quick question.
Can you
So
hear?
I'm wondering about licensing, dispensary. So my question is, say 20,000 people, just a random number, in Vermont applied for a license. Does it then become, go into a lottery and X amount of people can carry the license, and or does the license, is everyone who applies for a license allowed to have one?
I think right now, I would say, and I can be corrected if I'm incorrect, but I think right now we have open licensing for the smaller growers. You see, if they don't do open licensing and they do limited licensing like they did in California, that will cause the illicit or parallel market to stay exactly right where they are. In California, they had 3,000 people apply, and if I'm correct, and I could be wrong, it was around 300 that were given licenses. These people exposed themselves completely. They've been working for years. They've been paying, their employees, doing a good job of producing a clean product. They put out $250,000 or more to apply for the license, and at the last minute, they might have been, I'm talking about somebody specific actually that told me this, they were turned down for a very small thing on the last inspection. Okay, so all these people were put out of business. The federal government knew where they were, the state governments knew where they were, they had no choice but to shut down. This caused a lot of problems for a lot of people in California. I think Maine's done it the best way possible. If you go to Maine right now, the police officer doesn't want to know about cannabis. They don't care how many plants you're growing. If you're not doing something violent or you're not drunk, beating up somebody or whatever like that, they don't want to know about it anymore. And a caregiver over there can have 30 plants. Okay, it's not a problem. I've got a friend over there in Hiram, and he's got a beautiful setup there, and he takes care of so many people. And he's doing it pretty much for free, even though he's a licensed caregiver. He's giving it away over there. And so this is...
Fran,
yeah.
For people who want to get licensed and participate in the adult use, I think objectively speaking, the lottery would probably be the most fair way to do it, right? I mean, this is the question, some of us have been asking for the last couple of years. And I don't think even the control board really has a clear answer yet as far as, should I be camping out to be the first one to slip it under their door, on April 1st, whatever it is. There is a pre-qualification process that's happening right now that is open. Part of the purpose of that is to get a sense of what the demand is. How many extra people are they going to get? 500 applications for small growers? Are they going to get 5,000 applications for small growers, right? Hard telling, not knowing, as we say up here. So, I think I probably put the number at, we had 1,000 hemp cultivator, 1,000 hemp permits. Those were $25 a piece. Getting even a small grow license with the amount of things you're going to have to kind of go through. The license itself might be $750. You're still going to have to spend a couple grand on all your other stuff and the amount of time it's going to take if you don't hire somebody, to help you with the licensing and applications. And, I'll give a shout out Vermont Cannabis Solutions. I know they're working with a lot of folks, out there and, helping people in the pre-qualification, process right now. I'm sure there are others out there doing this work too, but those guys are friends who I work with, and disclosure. So that process is open right now. People who are interested should get on it as soon as possible. ultimately, all things come down to, I think in Vermont, there are going to be a lot of specific things that get worked out along the way. But the question is, you fit in with your community. Do people in the community understand what you're doing, what you're trying to do, what you're not doing? That you're not going to have maybe a big flashing light out on Main Street. So there's still a lot of assumptions, and people who are at this cannabis event, like probably part of the 1%, of people in the population who are super engaged and knowledgeable on this. And probably a lot of folks there want to be maybe want to be in a legal game. And is it worth going over and getting into that? Fran mentioned what happened in California. Here in Vermont, we've had like 3 or 4 years where really there has not been a lot of prosecution, a lot of criminalization. There have been specific things, and they've sucked. And but ending cannabis prohibition in Vermont really did a lot. We saw a lot of data come out about racial disparity of traffic stops, and getting rid of the smell of weed as a reason to search somebody, help at least, slow down some of that racist bullshit, which a lot is still happening. But I think that's, for people who are looking at getting into that, starting local is the best thing they can do. But also understand there's going to be a lot of other costs, requirements, security cameras. I got a friend who's trying to do like a 5,000 square foot facility. The utility company, doing indoor grow. The utility company wants like a $10,000 deposit for the electricity, right? Because he's going to be running so much power through there. So, it's going to be the money, not the licensing. I think that prevents a lot of people from participating. I think there are people out there interested in like collectives, cooperatives, wholesaling, all that kind of stuff. We're looking at things that already exist in Vermont as models. I think that's a smart thing to look at, whether it's policy or those of us in business, right? We're looking at it. But they're talking about this in the tourism industry in Vermont. I'll be talking about it at the International Agritourism Conference next summer in Burlington. Burlington's hosting that, which is really cool. But Vermont Department of Tourism, that's another thing. Anybody who's out there in the audience, if you have a business that caters to people from out of state, we're in southern Vermont, so it's like you probably cross 2 states every week, right? Like, that's another good thing to press. Your Chamber of Commerce, your whatever, if you're part of the Convention Bureau or any of those groups, these conventional business spaces, they need to hear about cannabis and the economic impact. With federal prohibition, we're still really pretty screwed. And then once federal prohibition happens, there's going to be a huge, once it ends, there'll be a huge flood, right? Cannabis going across state lines and the price will drop out. So what does it look like in 10 years? Very different from probably what it looks like in the next 2 or 3. But it's exciting times, and hope people don't lose their shirts and really know what they're getting into, and talk to somebody who did hemp, before you spend thousands of dollars on this.
Eli, would you talk about what you're doing with events and what we've done? Let's start with July 1st, 2018, an event where we had the Sheriff's Department as our security, and there was no problem. So these are the things that we're dealing with on that level.
Yeah, that's kind of the big question since 2018 is like, what is the status of consumption, and can I advertise? If I'm having a music festival, can I advertise that you can consume, that it's 420 friendly? Like, how does that work with a space, with a venue? And really the definition of public. Right now, public consumption is still illegal, and the definition of public, it could be any place that's open to public accommodation, or you could make the argument that if you rent a place out and you have ticket sales and ID checks, that it's a private event, it's no longer a public place or event. Those of us who are out there doing events where consumption is featured and happens, are super careful about how that's kind of presented. And, in the next 2 years, that's all going to change, especially, there's going to be a lot of investment in the regulated market, including the state. So I think the game's going to change when it comes to enforcement, and what everybody can kind of get away with once there's a taxed alternative. sort of out there. So I think events will become more regulated in the future. I think I have a proposal that's been out there, to just have event permits kind of like alcohol, sort of like they did when tap rooms started, just so you could know, or even to have a catering license so you could have a designated area, like you have a beer garden, where you could say whether it's at a concert or at a wedding venue, whatever. We don't need to reinvent the wheel here. We do know, and again, this is a big point of discussion, and Commissioner Pepper, I'm sure Commissioner Holberg, Commissioner Harris, they've all, I've heard them explicitly talk about weddings, right? We know weddings are such a huge industry in Vermont. So if you can't have Vermont cannabis at your Vermont wedding, in the next year or so, what are we doing? Especially after COVID and how hard everything's been hit and how much we needed to come back. So there's a lot of incentive for us to figure that out sooner rather than later with the event stuff, and kind of how consumption is allowed or advertised. Lounges, that's something that the control board has talked about being, it's not going to happen in year one for sure, maybe not even in year 2 or 3. But that's something that's out there for discussion, right? Can you have a place where you can consume cannabis that's, like a bar?
Right, because if you're a tourist, you really don't have any place to consume your cannabis at this time. So if you're coming into the state, we're selling it to you, we're going to sell it to you from that store, but boy, you can't smoke it on the street, and you better have a place that's willing to let you smoke it. So your smoke and snooze, your inn that's going to be cannabis friendly will be popular, but we'd like to get it so that there are places that people can come and consume legally.
Bud and breakfast.
The bud and breakfast, yeah, that's,
I like smoke and snooze. I mean,
that was mine. That's my smoke and snooze. I got that one.
We like that. We've all heard, Fran. That's yours. Credit, at least in this Zoom. The
Smoke and snooze and wake and bake.
Wake and bake. I didn't do that one. I just smoked and snooze.
the thing that's tough with the consumption lounges, again, the concerns that are still out there. The driving, right? Consumption lounges are difficult, right? Labeling and dosage. Right now, I think edibles are going to be limited to 5 milligrams per serving, with a maximum of 50 milligrams for the entire package. For medical patients, the restriction will not be that low. That's something that'll be higher, but let's see, the other concerns. Advertising right now, there's really restrictive advertising limits. You have to get it pre-approved. You have to prove that where you're advertising is reaching 75% of the audience is over 21. So there's going to be a lot of extra restrictions kind of on cannabis, and there are still a lot of concerns about that. The best thing people can do is start having those conversations on the local level. At least let these people know locally. If you're somebody who wants to be involved in this, hey, ask me the questions, don't make an assumption, and start doing that sooner rather than later. I mean, it's really, I think it's really going to, a lot of this come down to zoning, and really boring stuff like Act 250 permits and zoning and change of use, and, how much your town is supportive on that level too, never mind just if they approve retail or not.
Yeah, I want to say too, it's really, it's really important to get the town on board. So, I'll say this, for those out there who are in the business of trying to get their local town to Optin, this is really a message for you. I think what the message you need to be giving is that this is not just a cannabis issue. Allowing for retail opt-in in your local town helps the community. I mean, it helps so many businesses that don't even have anything to do with cannabis, from hotels, gas stations, restaurants, anything, anything you can think of. I mean, it's like more foot traffic. It's Vermont, for crying out loud. This is what we're known for. People are going to be coming, they're going to want to have a good time, and they're going to want to probably eat some delicious food down the street. So what I'm saying is, if you're a business owner, if you're someone who's looking to get the town to Optin, really get the support of other businesses behind you. But sell it in a way that you have to tell them that, look, this is not just going to help me, this is going to help the whole community, by bringing in people who maybe otherwise wouldn't have come to Vermont or maybe wouldn't have stayed here as longer. And it's just really, it's a way to bring people together. And so I hope, anybody out there who is looking to try to get their town to Upton, the best of luck, and please reach out to us, with anything that Vermont Rural can help with or aid in.
Fran.
Yeah.
So, I was wondering, like, when you were talking about like locations that people could smoke and,
Right.
and participate. Now, is that something that has to be approved by the state, or is that going to be a federal thing? Like, how does that work?
Right now, it's a state. The state has legislated, it says no smoking in public, just like no drinking in public. If I've got a beer, I can't have it out on the street right now. So they're basically paralleling the use of alcohol, okay, which keeps people that are not in favor of this in a position where they're more comfortable. Okay, again, we're going against 75 years of lies or more. I'm probably a few years behind now. And even Nixon, who actually contracted a report, went against the recommendations of the committee at the time and made it Schedule 1 when the report basically said, don't schedule it, it's a plant. And one of those gentlemen, I believe, still lives in Brattleboro, that wrote that report. So we've dealt with the obfuscation of the truth for profit by corporations that go back to DuPont for hemp versus nylon rope, the newspaper chain Hearst, who had a vertically integrated company with trees in Mexico, and he had his paper mills, and he had his newspapers, and there was a hemp thrashing machine that was a threat. And that's why this really came about. And there was a gentleman by the name, if you don't know this, of Mellon Bank, who was Secretary of the Treasury, and he was invested in DuPont, and he was invested in Hearst. So he took his then son-in-law, Harry Anslinger, and made him the head of this new government organization called the FBN, which is now the DEA. That was the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. And Harry decided that marijuana was going to be his thing. And Hearst didn't like the Mexican people, of course, or the Chinese. The Mexicans had ripped them off some trees. So you go back that far to the 30s, and that's where this all came in. And even my 92-year-old mother won't take some CBD after she sits down with me, a nurse next to her, and a cancer patient that we're working with, and gets it completely explained to her. So that's really what we're up against. So everybody go out there, talk to 10 people. I mean, Eli, these guys will tell you the same thing. Every time somebody speaks up to the legislator, one person is seen as 10. 10 are seen as 100, and 100 are seen as 1,000. So if each of you influences one other people to speak out to their legislators today, then these guys have spent their time well today. Okay, and we appreciate you spending your time to do it. Anything else you'd like to add, gentlemen, or is there any questions from the audience?
I just have one question, is the
Yes,
bill that's in, I guess, in either the House of Representatives or the Senate, right, that is coming up in March at town meeting time, or?
Yeah, March 11th.
The vote in here in town is March 1st.
So there's Nick, I think the one he's asking about, I think, is H 548. What committee is that in? And that's a House bill, so it's going to have to clear the House, and then it'll go to the Senate, not before probably mid-March. You mentioned March 11th, and then that bill would also then have to be either signed or not vetoed by the governor in order to take effect. So I think there's not a. I don't think is there a bill that's crossed over yet, Nick, from House to Senate. Or they're still in individual House committees?
As far as I'm concerned, I don't think any of the bills have crossed over.
Yeah.
But yeah, that date for crossover is March the 11th. I believe town voting day, I'm not entirely sure what the question was, but I believe town voting day, I think, is March 4th, March 5th.
Somewhere around there, yes. And we do have it on, in the town of Rockingham, we have it on our ballot to ask the question. And there's a lot of, because there was actually some good shows here in our community, explaining the details of it can't be 500 feet by a school, that type of thing, to be able to have a retail operation. And it gave a lot of good information. But I guess my question is that the one that's going to be in Montpelier that they're going to be voting on, which is sometime in March, I guess, and do you have a sense of where that is with the people that govern our state of Vermont?
Let me grab this for a second, and then you can come in. What we're seeing is inaction by some of the committees on some of the bills. There's so many bills out there, you got a list, okay? Nick was talking about a couple of them. There's the ones I talked about earlier, 186, which is the medical bill to change the medical program, 188 for the farming. There's so many bills out there, but these committees are they're not moving too fast. I was checking the state website, and you can check the website, go into the legislative site, and just type in the word cannabis, and you'll see them all come up, okay? And if you've got one of your reps in there that's in that committee, call them up and say you want to testify. You know, or you want to get your word in about it, and tell them, hey, can you guys just push this forward? I know you got a lot to do, but let's get these through crossover. You set up this CCB, you set up this board, these commissioners, let them work. Stop tying their hands behind their back and asking them to juggle, okay? And that's what our biggest frustration, I think, at least mine is right now, is the legislative, it's a stick in the mud thing again. And of course, we've been fighting this since we started. But that's what we really need, is the legislature to move on this and realize that these guys are trying to do a good job. This board is really trying to do a good job. I have a lot of faith in them. And initially I didn't. So I didn't think that would work. So that's what you all want to do, is you want to talk to those people and you want to get them out there to really move that bill.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'd like to remind everybody also that there is only 3 people on the Vermont Cannabis Control Board. And just to give you a level of what they're doing as compared to other states, Massachusetts has 120 people on their Cannabis Control Board.
You have Millie Marble, the miracle person.
So we have 3 people trying to accomplish the job of what our direct neighbor employs 120 people to do.
Right, and that was
So they are doing their darn best.
right, and there's a good reason, by the way, to go to apply for a license to pre-qualify, because they're going to get jammed up on the number of licenses they can put through the system. There you go. But it is a very small thing, and they still are tied to the legislature. And so what we need you all to do is move that legislature forward on these bills. Thank you.
Deb over there.
I've got a question, or I got a comment over
You got
here.
a comment?
I think one of the things that we need to remember too is on the local level for the upcoming elections here, that it's Article 5 here in the town of Rockingham to authorize the cannabis retailers under that VSA section 863. So if we want it here in town, pay attention to Article 5 coming up. For our local votes. We do have voter registration forms too, if there's anyone who's not registered. But that's one to keep in our vision for the local part. The other that I did want to mention is I believe we have an option locally to have our own cannabis control board. And I would definitely, think that would be a good thing for us to have in the local community.
I can speak on that directly. It is a further control that the town will have to say whether a business can be in that town. It will not affect growers, it will affect retail mostly, okay, because growers do not have to go through that process. But you will have just the say over somebody coming in or not coming in if you decide that business isn't appropriate for your town. So that's not a bad thing to have, but it is not required. But if you do not have one, then the board has the say. In other words, they get that control. So if you want the local control a little bit more, the lady's correct. You want to get somebody who knows what they're doing to talk about this. I don't think it's absolutely necessary to do it, but I think it can be helpful in certain communities where there's issues.
I say mixed bag on that. The control. I mean, look, a lot of the towns don't want to. The select boards don't want to give up that power. Alcohol is a good model, right? And if it's as simple as that, like, great. And hey, if you can stock it with pro-cannabis people, and have like the most cannabis-friendly downtown, right on. That'd be awesome. The other scenario could be true as well. But generally speaking, from my experience talking to people on select boards and city councils, a lot of them don't want to give that power up. If you can make it happen, I think it could be great, especially if you have people who are pro-cannabis. But one more mechanism, to add. So I just wanted to add, too, like real quick process-wise, I think the intent behind the bill and sort of this process was to take the question of cannabis policy away from 80 legislators and instead put it into a small targeted board that has an advisory committee, that's appointed and that works year round. So I think in the future, the way this is supposed to work is that there will be sort of the control board will do their work throughout the year, and there will be one cannabis bill each year that will be maybe lightly discussed and then passed. This first year, I think it's probably a lot more. There's a lot more going on, and we'll see in the future. Will the legislature continue to introduce cannabis bills, or will it all really go through the control board? From my experience, the legislative and executive are always going to jockey for power. So, who knows if that will actually be clarified? But the intent with this bill that the legislature approved, and they're sick of talking about cannabis, man. I got props to Nick and others who are down there doing it. I mean, the idea was let the board deal with it, let them, listen to us crazy people, lobby them for all these things, and try to educate them on something most of them don't know a lot about. So the idea is it's the board's problem, and in the future, I think there'll maybe just be one bill going forward. But we know some of these ones that have more energy. The S118, I think Fran mentioned, the medical bill.
186.
186. Okay, there's I don't know if it's 118 or 188. That's the agriculture bill.
188 is agriculture.
188. So that's in the Senate Agriculture Committee. I think that moved out. And then there's that House Bill H548, which there's a strategy involved in all this. But there's only like 75 days of the legislative session. Right? And they've got a lot of other things to do that are not cannabis involved. There's politics, there's all this stuff. So, we'll see. I think that, action, could not happen until potentially, we might be waiting until April 1st to have this information. It could be even longer, so it's like, should I pop 200 THC cannabis seeds? Like, I don't know, I mean, it depends where you're at, and there's just going to be a lot of uncertainty for people, and I think that's just going to be part of the deal.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, that's all right. Just let me make this one point. One of the things that I think we might have said, but we should say, is how transparent that this board has been. You can go to these meetings on Zoom. You don't have to drive to the office. Everybody attends. They listen to the public. Okay, the patients that are in there, the people that are in there, the growers like Eli and like Nathan and everybody else are being listened to. They're actually taking our ideas and putting them in the rules. Right now, rules 1 and 2 are already done. Rules 3, which is medical, is being finished, and rule 4, which is compliance, is being finished. And there's a meeting every morning, every Monday morning at 10 or 11 a.m. Nathan, is it 10 or 11 now? I think it's 11. But you can get these meetings on Zoom or actually on Teams. You have to get the Teams app. But you can get these meetings on the Teams app, and you can listen in and you can make comments. On Tuesday evening from 5 on, there's going to be a meeting for public comments. So if you have something you want to tell the board, please get right in there. We had a meeting on Friday, and they kind of ran out of questions in the first 30 minutes, and they had a 2-hour meeting. So I think one of the commissioners was like, maybe I should play some music. And we all got in there, the people that were in the meeting, and we came up with a series of questions and a series of suggestions that kept going for another hour and a half. And they were all good. So if you get in there on Tuesday evening and you've got a question or you've got a concern, you can get it addressed. They won't answer it directly, but they will because it's not a two-way discussion in these meetings. But you make your suggestion and they may change something like they've done on a number of my suggestions. And so we are getting that kind of flexibility from them. Again, all we have to do is get the legislature to follow through and help them do their job. Go ahead, Nate.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I wanted to, thank Eli for giving the shout out, because it's true. I mean, the legislators, they really are sick and tired about hearing about cannabis, but it goes without saying that right now, in this moment of history that we're in now, it's so much easier to amend the rules than it will be in a year from now. I mean, once this comes to market, businesses are operating, there's so much more at stake. It's just going to be so much harder to go in and say, you know, oh, we want to lower the fee. You know, anything that's like, and even the smallest details just been really hard. So right now is that big push. So, you know, I think there is something like 7 or 8 cannabis-related bills right now out there. It's a lot. It's probably the most there's ever been at one time. But, you know, it also echoes the importance to, and, you know, definitely, you know, everyone should be showing up to as many of those Cannabis Control Board meetings as possible. But your voice is equally, if not more, validated if you are able to testify for some of these bills. Because, I mean, as we know, you know, real power does lie in state politics. And in a place like Vermont, where legislators don't have any staff, I mean, who are they to rely on for getting their information? They have their attorneys, you know, they have their specialists, but at the end of the day, it's the constituents, it's the people on the ground, folks like me and you, who it's really affecting, who they want to hear from. So if you are capable, I really would encourage you to testify for any of these bills that you feel is important to you or your community, because again, they aren't getting this information anywhere else. I mean, it's literally open to the public, and the public is encouraged to join because that is their staff. That is the source of information for many of these folks. So, you know we sound like a broken record, but like call your representative, and call them a third time, and then get 10 people to do it themselves, because that shit goes so far. You know, I couldn't even tell you. I mean, the Cannabis Control Board, they're so transparent, they're excellent, but the legislators are a whole different ballgame, and I would say that they have, you know, 10 times the power for this kind of stuff that the Cannabis Control Board does. So if you really want to make your voice heard and have every word count, I highly recommend getting on the agenda for one of these testimonies. And the way you do that is essentially you go to the committee page for where the bill is. You email the assistant committee. Their email is listed on the left-hand corner. You say, hello, my name is X, Y, and Z. I would like to testify at the next possible convenience. Because it's up to the chair of the committee to schedule a hearing. So whenever they choose to hear it, you will be allowed on, and you'll be invited. I mean, anyone can go. You don't have to be a lobbyist. You don't have to be a specialist of any kind. You can be an average Joe. I mean, and these are the people. This is what makes Vermont politics so beautiful. Is that these are the folks and these are the perspectives that matter the most and that are actually being heard. I mean, you don't write a letter to a senator in California and expect to get a personal response back, but that is something that you get in Vermont. So I just want to really stress that to anybody who's interested. You know, you can reach out to us for any questions. This is something that we do a lot, but just want to stress that point and hit it home.
Yeah. I wanted to plug some events. You know, I know especially Southern Vermont. Like when we were doing Heady Vermont, there's always a thing like, you know, not enough events in Southern Vermont. I've tried to intentionally do more stuff down there. We're doing a ski days meetup Sunday, March 27th. We're just going to have a $50 lift ticket. Come and ski. We'll hang out, meet up in the parking lot at some point, meet up for a beer at the BLT in the tavern there. We're going to do a spring swap. That'll be also a Magic. That'll be Sunday, April 24th. And then in June, the big Vermont Cannabis Convention, that is up at Essex Junction, the fairgrounds. It's June 25th and 26th. There are tables available. There are speaker spots available. That's necann.com/Vermont. Their conference in Boston, that's the big one coming up. That is in March, the 18th through the 20th. So that's always a really great show. Check out, you know, Massachusetts is a couple years. It's a different kind of market, but it's interesting to go see, and they do a great job with that show. So wanted to plug those events, and you know, thank you guys, and you know, shout out to the Cannabis Control Board. I hope they heard all the nice things that we said about them, and we'll take that into consideration. No, just kidding. But it is going to be, you know, they're going to have their work cut out for it. So if they do hear this, enjoy it while you can. Smoke them while you got them, as we say. You know, with all this nice praise and love. It's going to be a tough job, but you know, they are doing a great job, and it's all happening, I think, at human scale. So, Jason, you know, shout out. I'm sorry we couldn't be there in person, but you know, thank you again for putting this together. I know you and your partner, you know, and all the other folks who were involved, you know, worked hard. So thank you. Wish I could be there, and we'll be down there doing stuff again soon, and hope to link up with people. You know, we're out there. Vermont Awana is my website and page. Do some consulting as well, theoretically, but you know, mostly going to be out there trying to trying to grow, work with small farmers, see if we can get enough of us together to get on a few shelves and go from there. But, you know, thanks to Fran, especially MC this in person. I know it's weird trying to interact with a screen, so you know, great job, and thank you guys again for having me and having us.
Well, thank you both for not sliding off the road today and getting home safely. And we're sorry you're not going to be able to enjoy the smoking bowls. I mean, I can smell the food
so
now,
good
bro.
in here.
Well, thanks, everybody. Does anybody have any other questions? You can hit me up after these guys go out and smoke a bowl. And again, very nice to meet you, Nicholas. And I hope to see you in person sometime soon.
Hey, thank you, Fran. Really, just quick shout out to everybody. Thank you all for being here. Enjoy the night. Wish we could be there.
I'll eat some for you.
Thank you.
All right.
There you go.
Cheers, guys. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.